How to End Discrimination. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Well, we're saddened today after the May 25th death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers in Minneapolis. In the 10 ensuing days, there have been protests, there have been demonstrations. I'm trying to think about what might be a Christian economics answer to this question, and I think I have one. It was a tragedy. It should not have happened. Why did it happen? Because of a lack of competition. See, here's how economists see the world. We see the world through a fallen nature. This is discussed at length in a little book I wrote called Economics and the Christian Worldview. And I say, without the fall, there's no economics. So we have to assume a fallen nature. We have to assume scarcity. And we have to assume there's not enough, and so people seek after goods. How do you control the fallen nature? Christian economists have one answer. It is competition. Now, probably should make that the second answer. The first one would be that everyone would find Jesus Christ as their Savior and have a change of heart and treat people equally. That would be called normative economics, meaning we want that to happen, but we realize that's not going to happen on this side of heaven. So realizing we have limitations and realizing we have the fallen nature, what do we do about this discrimination thing? And over, you'll hear pastors and moralists and all these kinds of people saying, there has to be a change of heart. I agree with them 100%. But that is not going to happen. That is normative economics. Let's look at positive economics, meaning what can we do in the meantime? Until we get to heaven, we're here on earth amongst fallen people, and people will always dislike one another. How do we control the fallen nature? The economists have one answer: competition. This is hard to think about. What about, that terrible video of George Floyd being on the ground with the policeman's knee at his neck? Can you imagine him turning to the policeman and saying, next time I'm going to your competition? Okay, I know it's kind of a weird thought, but think about it. Why did that event never happen in a competitive environment? Why did a store manager at Home Depot never do that to an employee or to a customer? Why did Target never do that? Because they know they're in a competitive environment. And if they act that way, not only will their black customers, but every customer of any moral standing will boycott the store and they'll go to the competition. Look, why did the Minneapolis police get away with this? Because they're a monopoly. There is no competition in the Minneapolis Police Department. There's only one. And think about this the next time you get stopped for speeding or you have a headlight out. Turn to the policeman and say, I don't like the way you're treating me. I'm going to your competition next time. Guys, there isn't one. In situations of monopoly is the only place you can find discrimination. Even my friends who seem to understand this issue well will use this phrase, institutional discrimination. And my answer is yes. In monopolistic environments, there is institutional discrimination. In competitive environments, there cannot be, because those who get discriminated against would go to the competition. Okay, here's what we talk about in the classroom. I showed the introduction to this movie called Glory Road. It was made in 2009. Really great movie. It's about Texas Western College, now called UTEP, University of Texas, El Paso. Don Haskins becomes the coach. And in 1966, the general agreement among coaches was you play 2 blacks at home and 3 on the road. That was the general agreement. Haskins broke the agreement. He played 5 blacks all the time. Or more properly said, he just played the best players he could find, and he didn't care about their skin color. In 1966, they came out of nowhere and won the national championship, beating Kentucky. What do you think happened the next year? And what do you think has happened every year since then in college basketball and in every athletic endeavor? There's no discrimination. You can't. It has to be a meritocracy because they're in a competitive environment. These people who tell you there is institutional discrimination assume that in 1966 they ended it in college basketball, but they've not ended it anywhere else. They've not ended it in monopolies. In competition, it has been ended. Look, this is kind of ridiculous to think about. In a competitive environment, Why would a person or a group who's been discriminated against continue to receive services and pay money to a discriminatory organization? Okay, let's talk about a couple of economists here. One of my favorites is Thomas Soule. The quote I'm going to give you is from his latest book, Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. I shouldn't say his latest book. I thought it was his latest. I thought he was done. I read this book last summer. Now on my summer reading list this year is his latest, again, called Discrimination and Disparities. Oh my goodness, this guy's written a bunch of books. Race and Cultures, the title of one. Migrations and Cultures, Conquests and Cultures, Basic Economics, Inside American Education. This guy's, Thomas Soule's an amazing economist, one of the greatest of the era. And he says, how do people get into poverty? He says it in a positive way. To avoid poverty, you avoid three things. One is you don't drop out of high school, you don't quit your job, and you don't have children before you get married. Let me say it another way. If you do these three things, your chances of being in poverty is almost zero. Do these three things. Graduate from high school, number one, which is free, by the way. Number two, hold any job for 18 months, even if it's a minimum wage job. Number three, don't have children outside of marriage. If you do those three things, says economist Thomas Soule, your chances of being in poverty are almost zero. See, the point is, poverty is caused by behavior, not skin color. That's Thomas Soule talking. He's saying if you avoid these three behaviors, or said in a more positive sense, if you do these three things, you will not be in poverty. It makes no difference your skin color, he says. Listen, there's another economist, a French guy from the 19th century, called Frédéric Bastiat. And his point is, he said, you see only what you see. You don't see what you don't see. He's most famous for talking about the broken window theory, and he sort of sides against that and says, yeah, you see the broken window and you see the glazer gets paid and etc. But what you don't see is that storekeeper, if instead of paying for the broken window, he would have bought a suit, and the suit, the tailor has to pay for the clothing, etc., etc. Bastiat, that's what he says. And so what he's saying, when you see the knee on the neck of George Floyd, which is a terrible, disparaging thing that any human should ever do to any other human, you are seeing that. Bastiat would say, what are you not seeing, right? And as economists, we would say competition. See, if the Minneapolis Police Department had a competitor, they would be better. Hey, all industries are this way, right? So here's an exercise we do in the classroom. We state this figure that women are supposed to make 78 cents for every dollar a man makes. Well, it's kind of interesting to think about. So I walk into the classroom and I put a little folded piece of paper in front of 4 different groups of students. One of them says Deloitte, the other says PricewaterhouseCoopers, the other says Ernst & Young, the other says KPMG. These are the 4 major accounting firms. Well, if you're a Fortune 500 company, you have to be audited by one of these 4, right? I mean, that's it. So to the student who has Deloitte sitting in front of him, I said, you learn the statistic that women make 78 cents for every dollar a man makes. You're running Deloitte, and it comes up that Exxon's audit is up for bid, and you want to beat PwC, Ernst & Young, and KPMG. How would you reduce your cost of labor? And the student says, well, I'd go hire all the women. Yeah, if I get a 22% advantage from cost of labor, I'd go hire all the women. I said, but they wouldn't come for nothing. You can't pay them 78. You got to pay them more. What would you pay them? And the student says, 82. You go to the next person in front of them, it says PricewaterhouseCoopers. I said, okay, women are now paid 82 cents based on what your friend across the classroom said. Now the bid comes up for GM's audit. How are you going to lower your cost of labor? He said, I'd hire all the women. Who that guy hired? Okay, you'd hire all the women, but they're not going to come for 82. You're going to have to pay them more, aren't you? And the student says, okay, 86. All right. Then you get all the women. You have a 14% advantage from cost of labor. I go to the third group. It says Ernst & Young. And I say, okay, now the bid for AT&T's audit comes up. And you want to lower your cost of labor. What do? I steal all the women from that guy. The student says, how much do you pay him? 90. Next, we go to the next one is 94, 96. Hey, in a competitive environment, there can't be discrimination. because this little exercise that I just talked about would happen. It would. Listen, I'm trying to be factually with you as much as I can, but I'm going to break that for just a minute here. You tend to think that these guys from Deloitte, PwC, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Exxon, GM, AT&T, Apple, all these companies, you think for some reason they have gotten together in a cartel, which is by economic definition, competitors who collaborate. They've somehow gotten together in a cartel, and they've said if we all pay our women less, we can get labor cheaper. You really think that works? No, it does not work, because the fallen nature of these guys is to compete. I promised you I was going to go off the rails and be unfactual here for a minute. Hey, the managers of those companies I've just mentioned would sell their mother's kidney for $1 million to have a 22% advantage from cost of labor. Okay, I'm done kidding now and I'm back to factual. But it's true, isn't it? You really think that those companies would purposely discriminate against women or blacks or people from a certain region of the country or certain ethnicity or certain gender or age? No, they wouldn't. To get a reduced cost in labor because they're in a competitive environment, they would hire the best. And that's what they do. See, listen, we live in a fallen world, and we are going to continue to live in a fallen world. How do we end discrimination in a fallen world? The best answer, until we get to heaven, by the way, where there will be no fallenness, the best answer in a fallen world is competition. Economists like competition because it doesn't allow people to discriminate. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our slogan is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.